remember the case of Cassidy Rainwater, the 33-year-old woman who was kept in a cage and then slaughtered in Lebanon, Missouri? Well, there was an appearance in court today by the attorney of James Phelps, the main perpetrator. They set a date for April 21st, 2023 to discuss the change of venue that was requested. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the case, I will dive in now and let you know, get you up to speed, since the second guy in the case is going to be appearing in court next week. Anyway, Cassidy Ray Rainwater, was 33 years old, and she was a loving, fun gal who was devoted to her kids. Cassidy did make some mistakes in her life, but everybody makes mistakes, so nobody hold anything against her, please. Cassidy lost custody of her son temporarily in 2021 due to a reckless driving conviction. The kid was in the car, so the Department of Family Services took the child, and he was placed in the custody of Ms. Terry, who is Cassidy's grandmother. And Ms. Terry states that Cassidy never missed a visit or phone call with her son. The son was shared with Cassidy's ex-husband, estranged husband. They never did get divorced due to the inability to afford the divorce. The two had fallen madly in love in 2009, got married. The relationship fizzled out in 2012, and they went their separate ways. And Zachary Paul moved to Oregon. Cassidy and Zachary Paul didn't miss a week of being in contact with each other. Cassidy also was devoted to her little boy that she shared with Zach. Then in 2021, Cassidy made a mistake. She got busted for unsafe driving, and the little boy was in the car with her, so she lost custody of the little guy. Cassidy was making her meetings at DFS for her visitations, her supervised visits with the little guy. And while she was trying to get back on her feet, get everything squared away, Cassidy accepted the offer of Jim Phelps to live with him in his cabin at 386 Moon Valley Road in Windyville, Missouri, which has a Lebanon, Missouri mailing address. So that's why you'll hear both Windyville and Lebanon, Missouri as being the locations where this case took place. Anyway, Cassidy was staying there. The final time she was ever seen by anyone outside of the residence at 386 Moon Valley Road, she saw her grandmother. Cassidy saw her little boy, and of course the DFS workers, and she was accompanied by a man named Jim. They weren't sure of his last name. They assumed his last name was Rainwater, but it became known that his last name was Phelps. He was James Phelps, the man who Cassidy was staying with over on Moon Valley Road. Shortly after she left that visit, Cassidy was never heard from again. Zachary Paul was concerned, since she never missed talking to him and that she always shared with him after having visited their son. So he decided to move back to Missouri and work on getting custody of his son himself and try to figure out what was going on with Cassidy. Meanwhile, Cassidy's grandmother grew more and more concerned because Cassidy then missed her next visitation with her son, and Cassidy missed the phone calls with the little guy, which she had never done, very unlike her. And the grandma obviously did not want to get police involved right away because she didn't want to get Cassidy in any trouble. She contacted Zachary and asked him what he thought, and he agreed with her that she needed to call law enforcement and make a missing persons report for Cassidy. And that missing persons report was taken on August 25th, 2021. And law enforcement made the report, which, I've put up here on the screen. And you will see that she had an active Code 99 at LCSO, which is Laclede County Sheriff's Office, and that is the reckless driving. The well-being check took place that same day. Officers arrived at Moon Valley Road and met with James Phelps, who stated to them that Cassidy had been staying with him, but she had taken off the previous month in the middle of the night, that she went and met a car at the bottom of the driveway and he thought she was going to Colorado. The officers did a little look-see around and didn't see any sign whatsoever of Cassidy. None of her stuff was at the house, so they just left. Then in September, and let me check the date, on September 16th, 2021, the FBI received a cyber tip. The tip was a folder full of photos labeled Cassidy, and in this folder were pictures of a partially clothed young woman in a cage, and then later on pictures of that same young woman hanging from a gantry crane, and then further photos of her being dismembered and eviscerated, and it was just horrendous. So the FBI passed that on to the Dallas County Sheriff's Office. When they looked at the photos, they recognized Cassidy immediately and went straight to James Phelps's property. This time they met with James Phelps and took him into custody. He had some of those exact same photos on his phone, which they then confiscated as well. Meanwhile, they got the warrants and searched the house more, and they found lots of evidence, including digital evidence on phones and computers that also implicated James Phelps's best friend, Timothy Norton. And Timothy was taken into custody shortly after James was. James refused to talk. Timothy, he did talk on the 20th of September. At that time, he admitted that Cassidy was dead. He admitted that he and James Phelps were responsible for this. He stated that James had contacted him and told him to come over to the cabin, that Cassidy was asleep on the floor near the door, and that they were going to carry through with their plan. And their plan was totally outlined in the digital messages that the police have in their custody at this time. The evidence, computers, etc., were all collected before the cabin mysteriously burst into flames and burned to the ground, which led to questions of whether there were other people involved. Law enforcement states that Timothy Norton and James Phelps are all that's involved in this. Anyway, Timothy stated that when he arrived at the cabin, Cassidy was asleep, and he and James attacked Cassidy. Timothy held Cassidy's legs down while James Phelps did everything he did, including strangling Cassidy and then putting a bag over her head. And once Cassidy was deceased, the two men carried her out to the gantry crane, where she was dressed out as if she were a deer. And then they carried her pieces back into the cabin, put them in the tub, and then they continued to process Cassidy. The evidence that police have gathered includes human flesh dated July 24th and labeled Cassidy in the freezer. The FBI analysis and everything all came back that the flesh that was labeled Cassidy did belong to Cassidy Rainwater. Cassidy's skeletal parts were found scattered on the adjacent property, which sickly belonged to Bill Rainwater, Cassidy's grandfather. These two men are very disgusting people, and I am looking forward to seeing what happens to them in court, although I am a little bit concerned because there was a different case in Missouri that I thought was a slam dunk case. It was the Rebecca Rude trial, where Rebecca was accused of killing and burning the remains of her 16-year-old daughter, and she had a trial by judge only. The judge took a real long time to come back, convicting her only of abandonment of a corpse, and so she walked, time served in jail, and that was it. So I'm really hoping there's no mistakes in this case. The evidence seems to be overwhelming. I sure hope these guys get what's coming to them. I'll keep you updated as new information comes in. Thank you for watching.